my name is Daniel Kafer, and here on my channel I try to help unpack some of the impacts that more advanced AI and innovation will have on you, your work life and your economy. So I'm trying to take some very complex things and explain it in a more simple, non-technical language. And today we're going to talk about a potential price collapse. Maybe you heard about it already. People such as Elon Musk, for example, is talking about how AI and later artificial general intelligence, AGI, will cause prices to collapse. So basically he is saying everything from homes to cars to food to entertainment, the prices will drop towards zero. So what I want to talk about today and try to unpack is, will this actually happen? And what could a price collapse mean for you? Could it mean that your assets, such as your house and your car, become worthless? Or would it mean that your lifestyle, as you know today, would become super cheap? Well, maybe both, maybe none of it. That is what we're going to talk about today. So let's try and unpack the future. Of course, when we are talking about the future, nobody really knows what is going to happen, so please take this with a grain of salt. But I am going to dig deeper into what some of these people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman are saying about the price collapse and give my best predictions and analysis on what is going to happen. So if you stick around and watch this video, I will try to answer the following things. So will the price collapse actually happen, or is it just Elon Musk and some other people trying to grab headlines by saying something slightly extreme? And also, what is actually a price collapse? And if it's going to happen, when is it likely to happen? And how will it impact you? Could the value of houses, your house or your apartment, drop dramatically, leaving you in more debt than you actually have value on your house? Could it also mean that the current living expenses you have could drop to less than half of what they are now, which would be a pretty nice thing if you're able to keep your job and have the same income or even more? Then suddenly you would be quite rich. You would be more than double as rich in terms of spending power than you would be today. Then I'm going to look at in more detail which goods and services are going to decrease in price and which might actually increase in price. And finally, I'll try to give you a little bit of a recipe on how you could, so to speak, play the price collapse. How can you make the price collapse or the reduction in prices actually work for you? So let's just go back to what Elon Musk is saying. One of the quotes I've seen him say several times is, all essential goods and services will basically become almost free. So what he's imagining is that artificial general intelligence will be able to produce the goods we know, such as cars, houses, food, and so on, at very low cost. So behind this is not just artificial intelligence, but also robotics. So for example, while an Uber driver might earn, let's say, $40,000 or $50,000 a year, a robo taxi would not need that salary. It could operate almost for free. So Elon Musk is not alone talking about price collapses and AGI taking over labor costs. Bill Gates, Ray Kurzweil, if you don't know Ray Kurzweil, he's one of the most respected futurists and is quite often, 2/3 of the time, quite accurate in his predictions. Sam Altman, maybe you know him from OpenAI, they're the ones who developed ChatGPT. He's also writing about how AI, AGI and robotics will be leading to a significant drop in the cost of living. So is this good for you, or do you need to worry? I guess the answer is kind of both, all depending on how this pans out. So try to imagine this. I think we all agree that artificial intelligence and more artificial intelligence or more advanced artificial intelligence and robotics will be able to replace labor at a lower cost. So I think what we actually argue is how quickly will this happen and how many of the current jobs and future jobs will actually be left for humans to do. So the timeline is still being debated, and also the extent to how much AI and robots can actually replace human labor is also being debated, but that it will happen is not debated so much. There have been some estimates of how much would a robot cost per hour, so if you compare it to a human worker. So the estimate right now is about $10 an hour. That's already quite cheap. In 10 years, that could be $1 an hour. And in 20 years, that is estimated to be less than 10 cents an hour. So there's general consensus that robots will become cheaper, AI will become cheaper, and they will become more and more capable. So it seems that, of course, efficiencies coming from AI and robotics will happen. So it's not just about replacing labor. Another cost driver is that AI will be able to optimize the manufacturing process, simply finding smarter ways to manufacture things and services. And also many products we've seen today are not very personalized. It's a one-size-fits-all. That is everything from when you come to the doctor and he will ask you basic questions about your health. Again, an AI together with wearables would be able to scan you and offer you a very customized service or a very customized product. So there are many different thoughts of efficiency gains that we can imagine in the future. So it's logical, right? Once we see much cheaper robots and AIs replacing jobs at almost zero cost, it is logical that prices will fall. Well, actually, we could see two things, right? We could imagine companies earning a lot more money because their costs are reduced. And if they keep their prices stable, that they will just have much higher profits, leading to higher stock prices. But in any industry where there's a bit of competition, we'll see competition driving the prices down. So I think that the different scenarios we're talking about is there could be a business as usual scenario that inflation stays low or as we have been accustomed to around 3% per year. So some goods and services will increase in prices, other will be lower in the future. But all in all, the government is able to keep inflation positive, so prices do increase, and they could do this by keeping interest rates super low. They could increase the money supply, which basically means you print more money, so there's more money to go around. Normally, this will also push up, for example, stock prices. It would also, another mechanism could be lowering taxes. So all ways of handing back money to the consumers. Another scenario, maybe I should say, I don't think this scenario is super realistic. I think the impact of AI is too strong and the impact of robotics as well. So I think we will see a scenario with lower than normal inflation, probably stably. It could be stable prices, like that would mean zero inflation. And again, with zero inflation, you would see some products becoming cheaper and cheaper and other products becoming more expensive. But all in all, when you look at the average consumption of people, it would be more or less the same. So I think this is a scenario where we do see AI coming in, replacing quite a few jobs. But at the other hand, we would see a lot of new jobs being created. But all in all, we would not, we would see more unemployment, but the government would be able to intervene. Perhaps they create some form of universal basic income, which means everybody would get a certain amount of money that you could survive on, and then you could replace your normal job with more, you could call it labor of love, or simply just jobs you're interested in. So basically you're going from your well-paid job to maybe becoming a YouTuber or opening a small cafe or just sort of helping people out. Many different things that you would love to do. Maybe you can earn a little bit of money on it, but nothing like your previous job. But that kind of combined with a universal basic income, it would be enough for a decent life. And since in this scenario, we would not see prices increasing and probably we would see basic goods such as food decreasing in price, you would still be able to sustain a decent existence. Then we have the third option where we start to see deflation. So prices on average drop like 1 to 5% per year. So things become cheaper and cheaper. This might happen if AI displaces people at mass. So, and at the same time, there wouldn't be any UBI in place, or maybe it's late, or maybe it's too low. So you actually start seeing the demand for goods from people start to drop a little bit because a lot of people do not have employment and they do not have a salary compared to what they had before. You might see richer companies, you might see richer individuals due to companies having higher profits, but wealth would be more concentrated. And the government might try in this scenario to lower the interest to zero, but it might simply not be enough because the automation of jobs is just too quickly. The final scenario is a price collapse. So the way I define a price collapse is that we see prices consistently one number of years drop more than 5%. And again, this is an average, right? So you could see prices of cars dropping maybe 25%, but prices of food only dropping, let's say, 2%. We don't know the exact dynamics, Again, it will depend on where AI can optimize the most and where and when robotics come into play. But in general, we see prices falling. We see a lot of unemployment. We will probably have experienced a government being, just late to the party in terms of finding new ways of redistributing wealth. So these are the four scenarios. After quite a lot of research, I think the two middle scenarios are the most realistic. So either like stable prices or some deflation. And that is based on a view that AI will continue to advance quite quickly, and that we'll also see robotics really coming into the workplace in the next 5 years. I think a price collapse will not happen. I think it will be more of a gradual process, and I do think governments will, intervene, and they will support people who are permanent unemployed. So I think that will stop a direct price collapse, but I do think that a deflationary environment for many goods could be quite realistic. Anyway, why should you listen to me and not just some other people about this? So a little bit about me. My name is Daniel Kafer. I spent almost all my time looking at the development of innovation and artificial intelligence and how I can help people and companies form strategies to deal with the development of artificial intelligence. I'm working with a company and platform called Supertrends, where we have more than 4,000 predictions from experts in all areas on artificial intelligence and innovation and how that will impact the future. And I'm an expert myself within media and tech in terms of predicting the future. So I share this knowledge through my YouTube channel, which I've just begun, and as a keynote speaker as well. Before that, I had several jobs in tech. One of them was as the country head of Meta in Denmark. So if you like this kind of content, please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'm very keen to hear from you on what you're interested in knowing. Well, when we talk about prices, let's just talk about how do people actually spend their money, right? And this is not a static environment. Here we look at average household expenses in the US from 1970 to 2020. And so we see some goods become much more expensive. And we also see some goods where people actually spend less on them. So some of the more basic things like food, people spend less on food today, but they spend more, for example, on transportation and housing. So we are accustomed to changes being seen. Here we look at the same for Germany. We can actually see how the proportion of spend on food has decreased dramatically, while, for example, healthcare and housing has become a bigger proportion of the total spend. So what is important here to know is it's not a static environment, it's something that changes all the time. I just wanted to show approximately how I spend my money. We are a family of 4, 2 young kids, both going to private school. So for example, if you look at my spending, you would see that things like education is a little bit higher, but for example, transportation is a little bit less. So this is of course different for everyone, which also means that inflation and deflation will impact you in different ways. Another look at spending is, of course, you pay, or most of us pay, quite a lot in tax, and that money is spent as well. And there have been some major shifts in the last 50 years of how governments actually spend money. This is a look at the United States, and we see social security, so helping people who don't have a job, has generally increased. The same has Medicare. So that's pretty important, that we've seen a shift from the government spending a lot of money on the military and defense to much more money on keeping people healthy and keeping people off the streets. So you might say, well, it's not working. There are a lot of poor people in the US, but this is still the shift that we are seeing. Another thing is, when you think of inflation and you hear numbers like, the inflation is 2 or 3 or 4%, or even here after COVID when it was almost around 10%, it's very important to understand that it doesn't come evenly spread. We have seen, like in the last 14 years, for example, this is mainly prices from the US, so education has become more expensive, healthcare has become more expensive, housing has become more expensive due to the increase in housing prices and rental prices, but also due to a high interest rate, for example. Childcare is more expensive, and food and beverages are more expensive. So I think we're especially seeing categories with quite a lot of human labor as the ingredient are becoming more and more expensive. But there are also goods that actually continue to decline in price. For example, the telecommunication services such as internet, broadband internet. We'll come back to discuss the quality, because you're not getting the same for your money either. Sometimes you get more, sometimes you get less. Natural gas has become cheaper, for example. Computers, power and storage of computers have become cheaper, like for example also batteries in cars. Solar panels are a lot cheaper now than 14 years ago, so like 75% cheaper, something like that. And any type of consumer electronics have seen quite a big drop, around 50%. So what these numbers do not capture is the change in quality. Like, you can always discuss quality, but like smartphones today are just so much better than smartphones 14 years ago. I mean, it's the camera, it's the memory, it's the apps, it's everything they can do. They're just so much better. I don't think that can be discussed. Different thoughts of medical devices and services. You might have seen a price increase, but generally you could say that medicine and different medical devices are getting better. Cars, you can of course discuss it. I would argue cars are more comfortable today. So you get more value for money, you get more space. You definitely have more horsepower in the same types of cars than you had previously. And home appliances probably slightly better, maybe not much. But you also have goods where you can actually discuss if the quality has decreased. Like for example, packaged snacks and foods. Many of them, maybe the nutritional value is not going up. Some low-end electronics might not have improved. The quality of clothing, I think you hear more and more when talking about the lower end, you could call it fast fashion, that you wear something or you wash it a couple of times and it's basically broken. It could be the quality of flying. You might experience airlines offering you less and less service, like you can't add your suitcase if it's economy flying. You have to pay for your food and so on and so on. Furniture would be another example. A lot of cheaper furniture today will not be as durable and made in less solid quality than it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago. But when we discuss how will AI and AGI and robotics actually impact prices, it might be worth to look at how much labor there is in the actual cost. So for example, looking at housing, building a house, about 20 to 30% of a finished house might be the actual labor cost. So there will be machines building the house today, there will go a lot of materials into the houses and so on. When we're talking about healthcare, both on the state side and on the personal expenditure side, the human factor is more than 50%. Education, it's no surprise that most of the cost is of course again human capital. It's about the teachers, they're front and center when it comes to education today. Transportation, well, it depends a little bit. If we're talking about, like for example, a taxi, it might be almost half the cost or more in some countries. That is the labor. When we're talking about actually building a car, it's probably quite a lot less. So looking at food, it's about 30% of the cost is from labor. If we look at the defense budget, it's almost half the cost. Social services, around half the cost. And public administration from the government side has a quite big component, being the labor cost, up around 70%. So this is of course important when we look at where could costs actually be saved. So when we're talking about a price collapse or a deflationary environment, let's talk about two factors. How much could prices decrease and in which categories and by what timeline? So for example, looking at different reports, IMF reports, McKinsey reports, and so on. Just because it's in a report, it doesn't mean it's the truth, but let's use it as a guideline. So we are seeing transportation at the very top in terms of the estimated decline in prices, and we'll dig further into that because it's an interesting area and it's quite a big chunk of the total cost for most households. It's no surprise that electronics manufacturing will continue to drop quite a lot. So if you're happy with your 2024 flat screen, you can probably get a flat screen for below half in 2040, and it's probably even better quality. So that will continue. Cars will continue with lower costs, 15 to 25% within the next 5-6 years, and up to minus 50% by 2040. But we'll go into that. Energy might be more and more efficient, especially if we get nuclear fusion commercially. Then a drop beyond 50% could be possible in the next 20 years. Travel is of course connected a lot with the prices of transportation and the prices of energy. So housing is of course a big one. What we're predicting here is a slightly slower decline in the cost of housing, and I will get much more into that. Also a slower decline in food. This could mainly be led by more efficient processes in actually creating food. Public administration, well, there's probably quite a lot to say, but it will take some time, and it has a lot to do with politics. And so you can go through the list. So generally, all major areas are likely to see a decline if we do not intervene politically in terms of stimulating demand. We do not, print more money to get demand up. We do not lower interest rates by a lot. And we do not tax robots, artificial intelligence. So, I mean, these would all be factors that would kind of delay this pricing decrease. But let's have a look at, for example, an electric car. So if you're listening to Elon Musk, he has an ambition to launch the Model 2 of the Tesla, which should be like a cheaper model. And you're seeing the Chinese electrical cars entering the markets. So what we're likely to see here is that battery costs will continue to decline. The factories will be much more manned by robots, which will decrease labor costs. And there will also be, I think, an element of economies of scale here. So the more electric cars become the norm, the more will be produced, and that will lower the cost further. So it's not unrealistic to think that today's low-end model of an electric car costing, let's say, $25,000 could only cost maybe $8,000 to $12,000 in 2040. So will this mean an above average price or value decline for the car you just bought? Well, realistically, yes. I would say that a new car today would likely depreciate more in price than previously because you will see the prices of new cars declining. So you can kind of add that price reduction on top of the normal usage reduction on a used car. So yes, I think cars will decline faster. Another element in transportation that's really interesting to look at is the implementation of robo taxis, so driverless cars working as taxis. So right now, building a robo taxi is more expensive than building a car, and there's a lot of investment going into safety and testing and so on. So today, let's say in San Francisco, for example, for a 10-mile drive, and well, there's a lot of traffic in San Francisco, so obviously that might take 45 minutes. So there's quite a big labor component as well, right? So there might be a slight price advantage to a robo-taxi today, but not much, because simply it's a new thing. It's very expensive to produce the robo-taxi, and all the costs going into safety and development will offset the savings. But then again, looking at the direction, then in 2040, it's likely that the price of using a robo-taxi would be less than 1/3 of what it is today. While if salaries do not decline, most likely taking an Uber, a manned Uber, would be slightly more expensive or around the same price as it is today. So we will see a major cost advantage by 2040 by choosing robo-taxis or other forms of autonomous transportation. And obviously this would create unemployment for drivers. But let's look at the biggest cost, and also I think the biggest value for a lot of people, their home. So depending on the angle you're looking from, this is both good and bad news, right? So if you are looking to enter the market, the good news is that houses might actually become cheaper, but not everywhere. So again, you need to think about supply and demand. So if generally society becomes richer and people want to live in a certain area, so let's say prime real estate in like an A location with a nice sea view, or close to a shopping mall, or really close to maybe a tech hub where there are a lot of attractive companies, so those houses might actually increase in value. On the other hand, if we're looking at houses in the suburbs where the land value is not such a great part of the value for the house, we could actually see decreasing prices for buying a new house. And here's an example. So in 2024, if it's possible somewhere in California in the suburbs to build a house for $700,000, maybe this is like a 3-bedroom house. In many areas, of course, this is not possible, but if you go further into the suburbs, this might be possible. That is likely to be lower by about 30% in the next 15, 16 years. Mainly due to the technological process of 3D printing, robots that can terraform the land and make it ready for building houses are a lot cheaper. So simply having more advanced building methods and less human labor involved is likely to drive prices down. So the question is, should you be worried in terms of the value of your house? And again, I think it depends. If you're not in a particularly attractive location, I think there are reasons to worry, because it is likely that a similar house to yours will be cheaper to build in 15 years from now. And if the land your house is sitting on is not going to appreciate, most likely your house will be worth less in 15 years than now. Again, this is just an educated guess. This is by no means an exact science. And again, political interventions could also change this picture. But what if you're renting? What will this mean for the rental yields and the actual rent you would need to pay every month? So here again, the picture is less clear. So while this type of house that we just discussed in the suburbs might be cheaper to build, the investor would most likely start to demand a higher yield because he knows the value of the house will decrease. So for him to make a sound investment, he might say, well, I need a higher rent because the value of the house might depreciate by 10 or 15% in the next 10 years instead of counting in an appreciation. So I do think we will see rental prices of these properties drop slightly in the next 20 years. It will not be as much as the house price is likely to drop. Again, a lot of factors will impact this. If interest rates go to 0 or below 0, investors might be happy with a lower return, and then we might see rental prices drop slightly more. But again, it's a question of supply and demand. My best guess is in suburban areas that are not in super high demand, I think we will see more affordable houses and apartments in the next 15 years, but I do not think it will be dramatic. So putting all this together, how could the 2040 household budget look if you keep the standard the same? So you say, basically, I just want in 16 years what I'm having now. Then if I'm spending 100,000 K, that cost could actually turn into something like 68,000 K. Again, depending on what the policymakers are doing to keep prices higher. But this is without the policymakers intervening too much. So we might see housing decline slightly, depending on whether you're building something new. Then it might be a little bit more it would decline, especially with low interest rates, and a little bit less if you're renting. So it will probably be the same portion of what you spend. Food is likely to be less. So the same quality of food will be produced at a lower cost point. There's so much competition when it comes to food that I do see those prices drop quite significantly by 2040. I think transportation is probably one of the areas that will drop the most. I think a lot of people who say we need 2 cars may say we only need 1. A lot of people say we only need 1 car might say in 2040 we don't need a car at all, because at that point robo taxis will be so safe, efficient and cheap that's an option. So I see a steep decline in the transportation cost for the average family. So here's a difficult one: healthcare and longevity. So I think a lot will happen in longevity research in the next 16 years. So I actually think that we'll be spending a lot more money on healthcare and longevity to stay young. But if we're happy to get the same service and the same type of treatments that we would have today, I would say we're able to do it in a much smarter way with wearables. So it will be many times it will not be necessary to see a doctor. Your wearable could basically tell you whether you need to see a doctor or not, and it could probably diagnose the issue and probably, if it's something benign, just offer you a prescription for some vitamins or whatever you might need. So the level of healthcare right now will be available at a lower cost in 15 years. That is what I imagine. Education, again, we might decide to spend more money on it, but if we are happy with the same level, I think we'll still have teachers by 2040, but I think some learning might be more efficient combined with artificial intelligence and videos, so it would be possible to offer the same quality of education than today with fewer people and at a quite significantly lower cost. So utilities and energy, as we become more and more efficient, and probably nuclear fusion might become a thing by the 2040s, it would be possible to see a drop. But also, for example, solar panels, we saw how much they increased in prices. They could contribute to a drop as well in the cost of utilities. Clothing, I think, again, can be automated more, and as the hourly price of robotics will go close to zero, we will see cheaper clothes when we're talking about the fast fashion segment. Entertainment, again, we might decide to spend more. I think some things like, sports rights, for example, will continue to become more and more expensive. But the free choices, such as simply watching on YouTube, will become better and better. And the selection of entertainment will grow vastly. So if you want to reduce that, you can. Potentially, some people might decide to have fewer holidays where they actually travel, but more have virtual experiences as well. So, some people would say that's a sad development, but again, it might be better for the environment, and it will help you save cost if you want to. There's so many factors of this to discuss, and I don't want to put everything into a video. Instead, I want to make more videos discussing all these topics, right? Because I promised you in the beginning, I would give you a few tips on how should we navigate this. So I think one, be careful with buying too expensive real estate in an area that is not considered super attractive. So if the value of actually building the house, if that is the main cost, you might lose money on that house. So be very careful if you're going to buy. I would definitely be looking at A locations that you think will increase in the demand, but maybe it's actually a safer route not to invest your money in a house. This is not financial advice by any means, but I'm seeing an environment with low interest, low inflation or deflation, where the stock market would probably do quite well, and buying bonds right now would also be attractive in that market. So I would say, instead of buying the average house, I would put more towards stocks and some towards bonds as well. But we'll dive deeper into what about the whole demand side? If you lose your job, you might have less money to spend if UBI is less than the job you came for, which of course sounds plausible. So we'll have to discuss this as well. So one strategy is also to buy things that might increase in prices. And I think looking at what might increase. So I think the more we'll see efficient AIs make the whole country richer, if politicians do not intervene a lot, we will see a further concentration of wealth, which will mean that luxury goods, like a house with a view, for example, might increase in prices. But it could also be rare goods, for example, watches, luxury watches, like Patek Philippe or things like that, might continue to increase quite a lot in prices. Fine wine, art, could be other examples. I don't know if I would advise buying into that, because you need quite a lot of knowledge and also capital to buy the right things. It could be the same with cars, like buying a vintage car, if you can really protect it, might be a great investment, because people will not buy it for the utility or the function. They will buy it because it's nice to look at. It's a collector's item. So that might increase in a future with some concentration of capital as well. So I think that is one way to navigate the future. So summing up, I don't think we'll see a price collapse, but I do think we'll see a deflationary environment for a lot of the goods that you spend today. So I think probably more good than bad news if you're able to keep your job and sustain to have an income the next 10, 15 years. I do see your household costs coming down, leaving you with extra money. If I were you, I would invest that extra money in the stock market, which I do think will have a golden period the next 20 years. So I'm not talking about the next year, but I'm talking about the average returns on the broad stock market in the next 20 years, I think will be above average. So this is where I would be focusing. Anyway, if you like this video, please do comment. The more views I get, the more followers I get, the more time I'll invest in making new videos like this. See you next time.